Welcome to Frontline, Texas. My name is Jack Blood. I'm sitting in for Richard Reeves, and though I'm not a thought criminal, I do play one on television. Welcome tonight, folks. Thanks for joining us. A little bit later in the show, we're going to be joined by Sheila Dean from the 511campaign.org. What is 511 Campaign, you may ask? It is a campaign to stop biometric passports. That is your real ID card. Now, these biometric passports were designed by the KGB and the Stasi, working with your very own Homeland Security. I say that all accent intended. This is not America, as the song goes, and we'll talk to Sheila here in just a little bit. We've got a lot of news to cover. Now, who is Jack Blood, you might be asking? Never heard of me before. I do a syndicated radio broadcast with the Genesis Communications Radio Network, among others. Our program airs on radio stations throughout America and Venezuela. Yeah, you ask, why am I on in Venezuela? I ask the same thing myself all the time. I've been doing radio for going on 8 years now. We've been syndicated for 4 years. And we talk a lot about the police state. We do talk about geopolitical actions. Break that down for people, because the news, as most of you know, don't give us all the answers. They don't even ask the right questions. They don't even have the right debate. A good example of that would be the North American Union. Many people are debating, will there be a North American Union? Aha, there is a North American Union already, so the debate is over. Now the debate moves to whether or not you think this is good for America or bad. Maybe you out there watching tonight hate American sovereignty. Maybe you would rather have privileges than constitutional rights. We're going to give you a chance to call in a little bit later if you're that messed up in the head. We'll certainly not to discriminate upon your calls, but we're going to try to explain to you a little bit about why these things are important, what's going on here in Texas, what is happening in the world and in the country, to kind of bring it all home. It is important, these things that happen that affect your family, and there's really no doubting, there is no excuse, and there is no missing that your family is busy working those 2.3 manufacturing jobs. Yes, that's right. Now they call the job at McDonald's, and they have for some time, a manufacturing job. So I talk about this on my syndicated radio program, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. I appreciate being able to fill in for you. A lot of people asking, what is going on in Russia? What's going on in the rest of the world? And maybe how does that affect me? We are literally right now into a Cuban Missile Crisis, and all of the analysts I talk to seem to agree with that. Today on our radio program, we had Dr. Bob Bowman, who was the head of Star Wars under 2 presidents. I think he has a pretty good understanding about what is going on in the world, why there is a missile shield going up in Poland at the perfect time when we have a conflict, a geopolitical conflict, almost war, and potentially even world war in Georgia. Now, the misconception is, and some of you who listen to the radio programs or maybe watch this station on a regular basis would think that Russia, the big bad bear, has come to attack poor little Georgia, maybe about the size of Rhode Island. And why would they do that? And shouldn't both Obama and McCain come out with very similar scripted rhetoric, similar to even what George Bush and the Bush administration is saying? And shouldn't we somehow sanction Russia? Shouldn't we be saber-rattling with Russia? And isn't Russia a broken-down country after all? And why should we worry about saber-rattling with Russia? Why would we worry? They're just like Iran. They're just like Iraq. They're just like Afghanistan. They're just like Syria. They're just like North Korea. The only problem is they're not. They have thousands of nuclear warheads pointed at us right now, and all it takes is one person who goes off a little bit half-cocked, if you can excuse the expression, and it's all over. It starts before anyone can say, hey, wait a minute, let's think this out a little bit. Let's have a debate. Is that where we want to go? So most people who are watching the news and have listened to our radio program understand the complexities in this. Now, Ron Paul, who many of you might be familiar with, did a TV interview on PBS, Public Broadcasting Systems, which is really the Rockefeller Foundation-funded, Carnegie Foundation-funded TV service that we have to pay for. One of those little pieces that comes out of your paycheck every week or every month. And it may not be substantial, but it does add up. Certainly a debate worth having. Do we need to pay for public broadcasting and national public radio anymore? But in this interview in 2002, Ron Paul very astutely pointed out that by the United States of America going and invading Iraq unilaterally, preemptively, we gave Russia every excuse it needed to invade countries like Georgia or the Ukraine. And history seems to be repeating itself. So very astute of Ron Paul to notice that in 2002. And one of the reasons why he didn't vote for the war in Iraq. He didn't vote for the invasion in Iraq. Now, how many of you out there think that we're safer without Saddam Hussein? Was that the question? Because that was the debate put forward to us by the so-called mainstream media. They didn't ask the other questions. What would it say to Russia? What would it say to China? What would it say to countries around the world who might want to perform similar invasions? And the fact of the matter is it did say something. It said, well, if the United States can go and attack countries unilaterally, preemptively, and slaughter hundreds of thousands of people, well then why can't we? And I think that Russia has a certain indignity right now being told what to do, especially when you look at the script. And here is a script, and it sounds a lot like a script when everyone's saying the exact same thing, as if they are reading it line by line from a script. Notice a lot of times the politicians talk, it sounds like they're reading from a script even if they're not. And when they're not, that's when they tend to say things that maybe they're not supposed to say. For instance, Barack Obama, during a speech in Oregon about 3 months ago, said that Americans have had it too good for too long, literally quoting the Brzezinski-Kissinger-Scowcroft doctrine, that economic parity would now have to come to the United States, that we couldn't have our thermostats down at 72 degrees anymore, we couldn't eat as much as we want anymore, we couldn't drive SUVs anymore without being so-called ugly Americans. Now, all of this kind of fits together, and what it says is we cannot go and read from the script and say that in the 21st century we don't attack sovereign countries, because this is the rhetoric that has been pointed directly to Russia, and it's laughable. It is made for consumption for potentially 15% of the American population and maybe a very small percentage of the world population. Think about what they said. We cannot unilaterally attack sovereign nations in the 21st century. Who do they think they're kidding? Now, the fact of the matter is, Russia did not attack Georgia, backed by the CIA and Saakashvili, who was trained at Columbia University by people like Zbigniew Brzezinski, and this is all part of the Brzezinski doctrine, and we've been warning our listeners about now for quite some time. Decided that this was the time and the place, for whatever reason. Maybe it's a diversion to take our eye off the ball in Iran or some other hotspot around the world, or maybe it's just a way to engage Russia, which is the ultimate plan, the Brzezinski plan that we have been talking about for quite some time. But the fact of the matter is, the Georgians, trained by the United States, trained by NATO, trained with and working with the CIA and Mercs, let the attack loose on South Ossetia. And the Russians really had absolutely no other way to go than to counter the attack, which of course led them right into the biggest cities in Georgia. And there has really been a major turning up of the heat with the leaders in whoever they might be. Of course, most of us know that that's Putin, old KGB, perhaps even the Rothschild family, who is heavily invested in Russia still to this day, has offices in Moscow. Whoever pushed the button saw this as the perfect excuse. Sure, they can go in and they can help the South Ossetians who are being massacred, who are a separatist country, who wanted their own country and want to be guided and ruled by Russia, not Georgia. Of course, many of us remember the Rose Revolution. Back in the day when that happened in 2004 in our radio program, I thought appropriately, said that that was a CIA coup, a coup on a sovereign country. Now we begin getting into what Ron Paul talked about during his campaign, the thing that everybody said he was a kook to mention, and that is unintended consequences. So here we are in the year 2008, and this is why it's important to you, because you're Americans as well as Texans. And here's why it is important.
You're on this camera.
It is important. Thank you very much. It is important because we are in a very, very scary time right now. It is important because in your name, that is your name, you out there, the watching, listening, reading public. In your name, we have tortured people. We have invaded other countries. We no longer have the high ground. We no longer have the moral high ground to say to China that you can't torture people, as Bush tried to do just a few weeks ago. We no longer have the moral high ground to say that you, Russia, cannot invade other countries, even if it is in your own national security interest. So not only have we spent our credibility under the Bush administration, and I'm afraid to tell you it's not going to get any better with the two so-called candidates that are running for the President of the United States right now, but in our name, by proxy, by almost power of attorney, we have used up all of our credibility. Not only can we not police the world anymore, but we cannot hold our head up as America in the land of the free, the home of the brave. The home of the slave, I think, as people are talking about these days. So I wanted to start the program with that. Again, on the program today, we talked to Colonel Bob Bowman, head of Star Wars. We were talking about the Poland missile shield, as if there couldn't have been a worse time to announce that we were giving Poland a Star Wars-style missile shield. We found it. Somehow our leaders, our so-called leaders, trusted public officials, managed to find this time to antagonize Russia and the rest of the world in a way that is almost unprecedented. So here we are, folks, literally at a time when we could go back to the 1960, 1962, 1963, and look at the Cuban Missile Crisis. We are literally this close. All it takes is the wrong person to do the wrong thing to be misinterpreted, and we're not going to be able to stop it. Now, why do I tell you this, and what do I expect you to do about it? One thing is, when the entire media is talking about how Russia is the problem and America is the good guy and all of this, and Georgia is the good guy, I would hope that you wouldn't trust them at face value. And I'm pretty sure you won't, because the mainstream media has been losing readers and viewers and listeners on a regular basis. Most likely they're going and watching a program like this, or they're going to your blog or a website, or reading a book that they're not supposed to read. You know, one of those dirty banned books that are coming here. As I like to say, so many things to read, so little time to read them before they're burned. So the first thing we have to do is not just take the mainstream media's word or these politicians' word at face value. I hope that most of you understand that. I can't believe that anybody watching this show tonight would just, without even questioning, trust what the mainstream media tells you or what a politician might tell you. And I think the old adage comes true. How do you tell when a politician is lying? Their lips are moving. So we know, and as Bill Hicks, the great comedian, used to say, all governments are murderers and liars. If we start at that point, we begin asking questions. And as I mentioned at the top of the program tonight, we want to have the proper debate. That is the most important thing. We cannot say to ourselves here as Texans or wherever you might be living that that's happening halfway across the world. It doesn't concern me, because it certainly does. In fact, it affects the price of oil, the price of gasoline, the price of food. It affects national security, which somehow always seems to filter down to your local police force, your local politicians, as we begin taking homeland security money here. I can't imagine it'll be too long before they tell us that Russians with suitcase nukes are coming over the border, and that's why we need to have national ID cards, no work list, no fly list, etc., etc., etc. In fact, today, if you live in Texas, our governor, Rick Hairdo Perry, I was a cheerleader too. That's his full name. He doesn't often use it in the media. Came out with a new program, and the new program is based on kind of the Amber Alert program. Perry announces fugitive capture program. There it is, folks. It's to get the fugitives, and it's to protect the police. Now, this program is surrounded, it's based on something called the Blue Alert Network. And it is based on if, by some coincidence, a police officer is injured or shot at, they can put out the equivalent of an Amber Alert statewide to catch the cop killers. Now, like the Amber Alert, this has many concerns which affect your Bill of Rights, your Fourth Amendment right, your Fifth Amendment right, because they don't ask. If a police officer gets shot, they basically now, through this law passed by Rick Perry, executive order, that they can go and they can come right in your home. They can put up roadblocks and check you in your car. Excuse me. So, what are the numbers, you might ask? How many police were killed in, say, the year 2007? 22 police officers died in Texas in 2007. Only 10 of those were by doing their job, directly doing their job, not an accident, maybe a shooting, or they were injured somehow on the job and then later perished from that. So, because of that, do we need to have, and this is a question we'll be asking you later in the program if you'd like to call in and give us your opinion. Because a police officer is injured by a criminal, now keeping in mind that is the definition of their work. They're supposed to be tracking down criminals, and it can be dangerous, very dangerous work. But thanks to the Blue Alert Network, you will be a suspect. Everybody will be a suspect. If you take a look at the Amber Alert, this is how these operations are. Because a child could be kidnapped or somehow in danger, all bets are off. Now, this happened to me in Arizona, where I used to live in Phoenix, Arizona, Mesa to be correct, and a child had disappeared off the street. And they went house to house searching for that child. Now, if you didn't let the police into your house, well, you would automatically become a suspect. Why won't you let the police in your house without a warrant? You would have to assume that you are somehow guilty, because wouldn't all law-abiding citizens just let the police come in anytime they want into your home? I mean, these are the debates and the questions we need to have. So when we're talking about this new program, the Fugitive Capture Program, or the Blue Alert Network, now announced by Rick Perry, what we're really saying is, let's put up more police control, more police state control, more draconian legislation, and let's do it for the children. Let's do it for the cops. Now, people are obviously going to accept that, and anybody who would vote against or to disagree with such a program certainly hates children and hates police. I mean, that is really how the Patriot Act got signed into law. You should read, if you haven't, Section 802 of the Patriot Act, which basically says jaywalking or speeding is an act of terrorism. They begin to redefine these issues into such a way and to make them political, to make it patriotically correct for you to go along with these issues. If you do not, you're not patriotic. You hate children. You hate cops. Here's what the Blue Alert program basically says. A law enforcement officer is killed or seriously injured by an offender, activate the Blue Alert. An investigating law enforcement agency determines the offender poses a serious risk or threat to the public and to other law enforcement personnel, activate the Blue Alert. A detailed description of the officer's vehicle tag and partial tag is available for broadcast to the public. The investigating law enforcement agency or jurisdiction, allegedly, submits a Blue Alert request to GDEM. And that's it. We're on Blue Alert at that very moment. Now, if you get in the way of the Blue Alert, God help you. There isn't a Fourth Amendment right anymore. There isn't a Fifth Amendment right anymore. Now look, let's all be rational here. Let's use some common sense. I would like to catch a cop killer as much as anyone else. But since when did we start trusting the government that a cop was killed and that the offender is on the loose? How many times have we seen with terrorism that, some nitwits were caught and enticed through a sting operation in order to bomb the Sears Tower? I'm thinking of the Liberty 7 in Florida. They didn't have any money. They didn't have any motive to bomb the Sears Tower or any other government edifices. But they were enticed. An FBI agent infiltrated them, said he was with Al-Qaeda, said he can get them $500,000. They were playing him for the money. It was a reverse scam in their opinion. The only thing that they didn't understand, because they were not too bright, was that they were being set up. A jury just acquitted most of those people just a couple of months ago. In fact, if you look at the data, almost every terrorist that has been apprehended over the last several years has been acquitted, or they're still waiting in limbo at a place like Gitmo to be tried. So when do we start trusting the government? When do we start trusting the police? When do we start trusting the so-called authorities to tell us when something is wrong and we need to automatically give up our rights? Now, most of you know the Ben Franklin quote, "Those that would give up their liberty for security deserve neither liberty nor security." This will kind of be the theme of the show tonight. We've got a lot of information about expanding police powers. Now, here's just a little glimpse into your future. So if you sit and you do nothing, or worse, you advocate a universal big brother police state system, what we'd like you to do is say no and go to your local authorities and have them say no to federal extortion and bribery, which is basically what it is when they're dangling all kinds of money in front of your local officials. Take the money and absorb and help us expand the police state. They really can't say no, because not only do they not get that money, they get cut off from other funding that they might have received from the federal government. So that's what we're asking you to do when we're talking about this stuff, is to think about what you're endorsing, even by doing absolutely nothing, what you might be endorsing. Remember that no generation has faced the problem that we've faced today. Think back. Did your father, did your grandmother, did your grandmother's father and her father and their grandmother ever have to deal with a total control grid? Whether it's right or wrong. Let's just say hypothetically that all of the people in power right now, locally, on the state level, on the federal level, I guess on the global level, let's just say hypothetically, all of them are really good people, good Christians, or good people who just mean the best. And I'm sure many of them believe that's true. That's how they sleep at night. But let's just say that hypothetically. How do we know, by setting up this universal electronic control grid, how do we know that a Hitler won't come into power? Somebody, and that's the buzzword that people like to use, so I'll use it to communicate with you. How do we know that an evil entity wouldn't come into power 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and use this control grid, which includes not only electronic, but biochemistry and DNA analysis and DNA manipulation? We've read stories on our program how the federal government and the scientists have been able to manipulate the fear gene, literally in your head, to alleviate any fear if you're fighting in a war, or to cause fear. I remember that people that fear their government get tyranny, and a government that fears their people get liberty. But just again, hypothetically. So we don't know. Even if you're out there right now and you're saying, well, all of the powers that be, they love me, and they're just doing this because they love me so much that they just want to protect me, so I'm going to let them do it all. We just don't know down the road, do we? Who is going to take control of these machinations? Who's going to take control of all of this control infrastructure? And I like to say on my program, when they say it's for your security, it's for control. I'd like you to try this little game with me at home. You out there, try it at home. Every time you hear the word security, like your social security number or homeland security, anytime you hear the word security, put in the word control, and I think you're going to understand exactly what we're approaching. So again, this has never happened in any generation in human history. They have never had the ability to process information with Carnivore or Echelon, the older programs, and the newer data mining programs that can listen to everything you say, read every email that you write, process it, and dump it into giant supercomputers, looking for buzzwords and looking for key words. We'll say them now for you. Terrorist, president, bomb, kill. We just made it in to the program and alerted the program that we could be terrorists. So think of the technology that we have now both a great gift and also a great curse. We need to monitor that, both locally and nationally. We need to have our citizens sitting and paying attention and being inclusive in the process, whether it is how DARPA gets their money to build these programs such as mind-machine interface or voice-to-skull technology. And we need to have a panel of citizens who are safeguarding the rest of the citizens from any kind of abuse of this technology. The often trite phrase is that technology is a double-edged sword. Well, I would tend to disagree with that, because if you know why and how DARPA or any of the various universities that are funded by the Defense Department or by the intelligence agencies or the New World Order in general, if you know what their target is to hit something. It's not to explore all the possibilities. It is to hit something directly. So how do we watch all the citizens all the time? That doesn't seem like a neutral technology to me. It seems like if you want to keep getting your funding and you don't want to lose your job, you're going to damn well deliver the goods and figure out how to watch all the people all the time. On our website, jackblood.com, I believe we have the story here in England. With every telephone call, swipe of the card, and click of a mouse, information is being recorded and compiled and stored about Britain's citizens. An investigation by the Sunday Telegraph has now uncovered just how much personal data is being collected about individuals and by the government, law enforcement agencies, and private companies each and every day. In 1 week, the average citizen living in Britain, and remember, this is all now being integrated here in the United States, every average person living in Britain has 3,254 pieces of personal information stored about him or her, most of which is kept in databases for years and sometimes indefinitely. The data includes details about shopping habits, mobile phone use, emails, locations during the day, journeys, and internet searches. In many cases, this information is kept by companies such as banks and shops, but in certain circumstances, they can be asked to hand it over to a range of legal authorities. We're seeing this now with the telecom companies. Exact same thing happening. And the story goes on to tell how people in Britain are literally recorded 3,000 times a week. Now, we've done some of the studies here in the United States of America, just to give you a clue, 30 million security cameras alone. Now, that doesn't count you on your cell phone uploading, what you're doing, your debauchery onto MySpace. Self-incrimination, most likely, and a pretty nifty technology all around. That doesn't include, all the private cameras that might not be included. 30 million security cameras alone in the United States of America. You can do the math. That's one camera, I believe, for every, 100 of us or something. Now, I've done that math. I'll have to do it again. And it gets worse from there. From mobile phones to the internet to loyalty cards. Remember when they used to try to do that in the supermarket? You couldn't get the discounts in the supermarket unless you signed a loyalty card. I may be mistaken, but I don't see those anymore. Somehow the citizenry rejected that. Your banking, all of your banking information, closed-circuit TV cameras recording license plates, and the model now in the United States of America becomes Chicago, Los Angeles, certainly New York, which is breaking new ground every day under Michael Bloomberg. This is our future. A license plate recognition, public transport, face recognition, registered travel programs at the airport. They literally have now airport kiosks that they've been trying out in Halifax, Canada, and around the country, where you get to go take a lie detector test to see if you're not a terrorist before you get on the plane. It's guilty before being proven innocent. Now, we're halfway through the program today, and I do want to have at least a few minutes to take calls on the show and see, number one, I'd like to know if you're for this new program by Rick Perry, the Blue Alert system, which when a police officer is allegedly shot at, and I suppose that can even be made up if they need to get to somebody, that they can come in and begin entering your house and asking questions, demanding answers, putting people in jail immediately. Again, very similar to the Amber Alert, which, by the way, Ron Paul voted against It is unconstitutional, and it is a boondoggle to fun. But this would be a good time to bring in our guest tonight, Sheila Dean. Sheila has been working, and she's one of the people in Texas who have been working to protect you against the national ID card. We want to talk to you about why we need a new ID card. Now, a lot of times this is built on, problem, reaction, solution, the Hegelian dialectic, as we've called it. They create the problem, they stem a reaction along with their controlled media, and then the very people that presented the problem, such as illegal aliens coming over the border, taking your jobs and taxing welfare and putting the country into debt. The very people that create the problem offer the solution. And one of the solutions to immigration, and you look back and you wonder just, how do we fall for this? Because we're part of it. We create the reaction. The reaction just stems up from everywhere about illegal immigration, and there has to be a solution. People are demanding solutions. Many of you, on this program, I know that the producers and the host have talked quite a bit about immigration. So here we have the solution. We all take an internal passport. We all take a biometric ID card, where our biometric information, where all of our information, and sometimes we don't even know how much. In fact, it's probably inconceivable to us exactly how much information could be contained in one of these little chips on one of these cards, to be carried with you everywhere you go, to be used if you want to fly on an airplane, if you want to get a credit card, if you want to do business, if you want to walk across the street. If they get their way, that being the federal government, you will have to hand that over on demand. They'll run it into a computer. It will link itself to a giant supercomputer, and it will be able to know what you did 10, 15 years ago. You remember when you were a kid and your teacher might have said, "Johnny, this will go on your permanent record." They weren't kidding, but now they finally have the technology to do that and to use it against you. Now, I really believe, folks, and we're going to bring Sheila in here. Sheila, scoot over here if you would. I think we're going to get you in frame.
Sorry to cut her out here.
One of us need to move over, or
No, we got it.
they got the camera. Thank you, Sheila, for joining us on
Good
Frontline,
to be on
Texas.
the program.
I've been just amazed by the work that you've been doing, and you are really just full of energy and full of passion to get this information out to people. I don't look at you and say you are biased, you just don't like, all of this stuff, and so therefore you've set your mind to stopping it. I think what you are trying to do, and maybe you can correct me, is just get the information, the proper information about this super system into the hands of the public so that they can make the educated decision, to know how much it's going to cost them, to know what they're going to have to give up in their daily lives to have it. Why don't you tell people, the viewers here tonight, where you came from, how you got into this, and what is the 511 campaign?
The 511 campaign is basically a moniker that I kind of ascribed to May 11th of 2008 and 2005 when the bill was passed. And the idea behind 511 is to kind of acquaint it with 9/11, because it's another disaster, and I think people should look at it at that magnitude. The reason why is because it's intruded into our lives on a very personal level. This is a passport, and this is my passport. In March of 2005, I just had an intuitive call, and I decided to go get my passport. This passport has the biometric technology, but it does not have the radio frequency ID chip. Now, I don't expect everybody to possess the same level of sheer, extra sensory perception about, IDs and that sort of thing. But I just had a premonition of sorts based on some of the information that, we get through trickle-down theory, from news and lack of news and that sort of thing. There's more that can be gained sometimes from what you're not hearing. And so I encourage people to always question what they're seeing and not seeing.
Yeah, I hope that as we move forward through the generations to have these technological advancements applied to our everyday life, that we begin to question these things. Again, this isn't something that our parents or grandparents or their grandparents had to deal with. When we were talking about you held up your passport there, and that's one of the ways they're doing it internationally. Of course, this is being enforced. I have a story right here from the London Telegraph, I believe. Fake e-passport is cloned in minutes. You can see this on my website at jackblood.com. Basically what they say is this security apparatus that is now, since 9/11, of course, everything changed. This is what we hear. This has been applied in every country, and especially if you're doing any kind of border crossing or international travel, as they might call it. And they took a passport that does have a chip in it. Now, we'll talk about what's on that chip. But there's just about everything about you, again, on that chip. And they were able to clone it and use it and falsify it within minutes. So what is so secure? That's the first question, is what is so secure about the biometric identification?
I think it makes the people who are going to own this information more secure. That's the only person who's going to be secure.
So there's an illusion of security.
And
that's what makes people feel safer, is that they're under the illusion that their identification is more secure.
I think.
Come on, that's it.
All right, yeah, okay. Just pull it out of me, Jack. I have a saying, and there is a saying out there that the situation with the chronically socially insecure, and I'm sure you have all met people like that, is that there's no amount of control in a situation when relating or to dealing with them that is ever comfortable for them. They have to be in control, on top of things at all times. They're completely neurotic.
Even though none of that's true or none of that's a reality, they have to at least convince themselves that they're in control and they're safe.
And then they have to convince the people that they're trying to dominate with their ridiculously overbearing behavior that that's how it should be.
How many people feel safe in their home because they lock their door, but if they don't have firearms or they don't have a way to really protect themselves, they're basically sitting ducks? Now, I don't want to worry people out there, but the fact of the matter is, and we've said this for years, all security is an illusion, which makes this even harder to swallow, the Real ID Act. So we've established this. Security is an illusion, and even technologically it's an illusion because these can all be hacked. Yes, we see the caller, Steve. Thank you. So now that we've established that fact, let's also talk common sense here to the great people of Texas or wherever they're watching tonight. How much does this cost, and how safe is it really? Now, when we're talking about the illusion of safety, another thing, and a lot of the state representatives and governors around the country, Governor Schweitzer in Montana has taken a big stand against this, where we broadcast with our program.
Nice.
That you can access my personal information now that it's been fed into this giant supercomputer, and I've got my biometric passport. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yes, officer. Here it is. Run it through your computer. But this can be accessed through terminals, not just everywhere in the country, but all around the world. And we saw with ChoicePoint, who helped steal the election in Florida in 2000, I don't mind saying, according to Greg Palast, BBC reporter, ChoicePoint lost all of their information. Somebody hacked into their computer. It wasn't that hard to do. And all of the personal information that you trusted ChoicePoint, that the government contracted ChoicePoint to gather on Americans, got out to a hacker. So we know that. How much does it cost? We've got numbers on this. How much does it cost just for Texas to adopt the Real ID system?
Well, the wide paintbrush that's pretty much been ascribed to most states as a starting bill of $3.9 billion. And that's kind of a staggered amount over time. And see, the problem with Real ID and the Real ID Act is that there's an expansion of powers that's been granted to the Secretary of DHS, who's an appointed, not an elected official. Okay, and that's very important to remember because, and I might want to add, you mentioned the Stasi earlier, as I add to my knowledge about the Real ID, that one of the consultants that was hired right around the time the legislation for Real ID was passed in the spring of 2005 was that Marcus Wolf,
former head of the Stasi,
right,
German police,
was appointed as a consultant to America's Department of Homeland Security. And I'm thinking, that guy really should have just retired. I don't think he should have been given another job.
You can get tens of millions of dollars to advise the Americans how to turn America into East Germany. But again, I mean, but this is kind of one of the peripheral issues. So we've talked about the fact that they're not secure. Real ID, biometric IDs, folks, it's a proven fact, they are not secure. They cost more money than your state can pay for. Now the federal government will pitch in, I guess they're going to pay about half. Is that a pretty good estimate?
No,
not even half.
No. And, they're going to pay for the paper.
Seed money is basically what you'll get. Something, right?
Okay. 3.9 million.
They are blackmailing the states, so we assume that we're getting some kind of token payment from the federal government.
They have to apply, and they have to apply with FEMA, and the grants are handled by FEMA, and the grant that was extended to Texas was $3.2 million, and that's nothing to get this kind of database going that they need and to secure the driver's licenses. They had a plan to secure the driver's licenses. They don't need, see, this is what the problem is with extra government. Okay, there's always going to be some guy, with pinky in the brain that has to, get more power, and that's the trouble. The problem is they want us to pay for it, Jack. And the thing is, we don't need it. It's that simple.
They're justifying their jobs by creating fears within the public. Certainly, immigration was one of those. Not to say there isn't a problem with immigration. It's just I want to debate the solution. I mean, we take global warming for an example. We talk about that on my program quite a bit. Before we start implementing all of the fascist dictates of global warming, chips, speaking of chips again, and this is what Mayor Will Wynn said here in Austin, Texas, I think it was about 8 or 9 months ago. They're going to put chips in all of the thermostats in Austin, Texas, and they'll control your thermostat for you. I mean, before we start going to these extraordinary lengths, and even we get into, eugenics and Malthusian solutions here, let's have the debate. So that's what we want to do here tonight. What happened? Real ID was scheduled first for 2005, and then in May for 2008, it was supposed to be fully implemented in all of the states. It hasn't even come close. Why is it taking so long for them to do this to us?
They can't have their cake and eat it too, Jack. They can't pay the tech companies to make it happen because they want us to pay for it. And the trouble is that they need our money to dominate us, and it's just not happening because the economy.
What money would be the question?
Yeah, with what money? So they've got to basically barter against. Maybe they can go beg the money from China to get this done, but I don't think that's going to happen because. We have a problem with our economy right now, which was kind of conveniently engineered so they can try to get us on this Amero program. And the thing is that it's just not working out very well. And this is the problem. When you get too much government and too many cooks in the kitchen, it spoils everything. There's just too much government right now. And it's a troublesome shame because we've got Republicans at the helm, and that's supposed to be smaller government, but what has happened is it's become the war party, man. It's become this, let's feed the endless maw of the Department of Defense because we're convinced that we have to be the strongest arms in the world.
They have a lot of hubris trying to sell us more big government programs. Meanwhile, the economy is crashing around us every day. I mean, that takes a lot of, let's say, balls. We can say that on cable TV, right? I mean, that takes a lot of... That's really in our face. Not to mention that what they're trying to sell us is a lemon. Even if you believe that we should, all carry internal biometric passports, they don't even work.
No, they don't. And you know what? They've had some terrible problems trying to implement this stuff. Okay, let's just take North Carolina, which actually has one of the strongest opposing. They've got 2 groups that are super strength 511 for what they're doing. But they have the North American Union logo embedded in their license, and they've been trying to implement Real ID. And it's been crashing hogwash. I mean, the technology is not gelling, and it's monkeys trying to push cables together. It's not working. And so they can, and every time it's exactly as you said, people that are in the IT industry live for this stuff.
It's not because they're incompetent, like they always say. It's not because they're incompetent or they don't have the money. I mean, we're making this case so that people understand exactly what we're dealing with. It's because it's impossible to create this. Even 200 years from now, there'll always be a hacker who's one step ahead of them, who's going game for game, who can break into the system. It's not the whole concept itself is idiotic.
Did you read Wired magazine?
I do. I read the Wired Online quite a bit.
I love Ryan Singel's Threat Level. And Threat Level, among other blogs, has published, I think they had the Subway hackers. They had a forum on how to basically hack into such data, DHS database, basically. And they could wipe out or manipulate the information so that basically you could become a Mexican immigrant. And so
who wouldn't want to be?
Right, yeah, but you could be walking down and slide your real ID into the system, and all of a sudden you're Maria Gonzalez, and you can now be picked up for not being an American citizen. And the thing is that is the kind of trash that we will run into with Real ID. People who are bona fide U.S. citizens, magically losing their citizenship and magically losing their rights because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time when some fool hacker, jumped in and decided to screw up the soup.
So I could be deported to Poland or Mexico if I don't have my real ID. And hey, I don't look like I live here, and I've done a pretty good job imitating the lingo, my surfer cross with New England, Texas accent. I had to learn that, but I'm going to fool you so I get deported somewhere. I don't know. Let's take a few calls, and then I want to break this down for people and tell them where they can go, how they can get involved. See, we make it sound, I don't want to do this. I don't want to make it sound like, this will just defeat itself. It's so obvious.
No.
It's so common sense that,
No.
It's not going to work and therefore it'll never get done, because that's not even close to the truth. They're going to do it anyway, like a lot of the things they've done that, like taking off your shoes at the airport, that seem to make no sense, but yet they get them through and they do them. But let's go ahead and take the calls. There's the number right here, folks. There you go, 477-2288. I'm Jack Blood, sitting in for Richard Reeves, Frontline, Texas. Let's go to line 2. I think they've been holding the longest. We'll give it a shot. Line 2, welcome to Frontline, Texas. Thanks for joining us. Did we get him? There he is.
There I am.
Welcome to the show. Do you got any input into this global electronic police state that seems to be wrong-headed from the very start?
Well, of course I do. First of all, I would like to say that I do not trust any form of government, whether they be the local constabulary, the governor of this wonderful state who's turning it into a police state, the President of the United States, or any of that ilk. I respect none of them. I'm afraid of them, but I do not respect them. Second of all, I would like to say, you briefly mentioned...
Well, this is about trust, so, obviously... I
don't trust any of them.
Goes without saying you don't trust them, yeah.
Also, go to what you mentioned a while ago about Montana. From what I understand about Montana, the information that I've been getting about it lately, Montana is full of a bunch of sanctimonious, condescending, constipated assholes like Dick Cheney.
Well, that's not true. I actually have an
Wyoming.
affiliate in Montana, in Kalispell, and there are a lot of really hardcore liberty lovers there. In fact, I think Ron Paul might have done as good there as he did anywhere else. So.
Well, yeah, I'm a Ron Paul supporter, even though,
Wyoming is where Dick Cheney's from.
Dick Cheney is from Texas. Dick Cheney moved to Wyoming so that he could become the Vice President of the United States.
That's here nor there. Are you going to, this is kind of a line in the sand for people. I've said my line in the sand is I'm not taking implantable microchip, which Wisconsin literally had to ban because the corporations were forcing the citizens to take these microchips. You can imagine how messed up things are when you have to put a law out saying it is now illegal to force our citizens to take microchips. But that's a line in the sand. Is this your line in the sand? What are you willing to give up to not have a real ID card? Are you willing to give up the shopping, the traveling, the renting cars and hotels and your whole lifestyle in order to put your foot down and say no to this?
Well, you might as well include driver's license in there too.
Obviously.
No, I'm not. The thing I'm afraid of is that if I get in a car wreck and I end up in the hospital in the emergency room, that they could just, kind of sneak one in while you're in there, or in jail, or anywhere else. Texans, there's so many. There's a police agency almost for every person in Texas, and they're getting to the point where they really enjoy what they do.
Is that the question, though, Sheila, here, that are you willing to go ahead and give up all of the things? For instance, if you don't have a credit card, how many things can you not do if you don't have a credit card today? And that's been a line in the sand for me for a long time, and we've adjusted to it. But isn't that the question? Are you willing to just say no to this, even if they try to beat you over the head with it? Are you willing to give some things up to make that statement, to put that line in the sand? Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
Should we answer that? Should we answer that question?
Well, I mean, that's why I'm asking.
Okay,
I'm
so
asking you, is
like,
that the question? Because it can get to that point. It will get to that point. If we can't stop this in the legislature, if we can't... Thank you. You have to just hit it a few times. If we can't win this through, the regular governmental process, through the legislature, through the media, whatever, and it does come and visit us, I mean, that's the question I would like the audience to answer. Are they willing to give up certain privileges, or I guess I should call them rights, they used to be rights, to not take this real ID card?
I think they should stem it off at the pass. I don't even want to answer that question. That's the trouble, is that you are the answer. The American people are always the answer. It's got to come from you. They got to take the money from you. They've got to get the legislation from you. And you know what? It takes citizen government workers to make it happen. And the thing is that everybody gets one. These top-ranking people, they're going to get one. Straight on down the line. Ron Paul's going to get one. Nancy Pelosi's going to get one. George Bush is going to get one. Everybody's going to get one of these.
Jack Blood isn't getting one.
Well, they want you to have one. And the thing is that I don't want one. And the reason why I'm involved with 511 is because I actually started having nightmares and couldn't sleep at night because I don't want this, and I don't want it for anybody. I wouldn't want this on my worst enemy.
If people, we're going to get to this as much as we have time for, people go to 511campaign.org. There are a number of things that you can do to get involved in this. I'm never as optimistic as some of my guests about how we're going to beat everything and stop everything, but I do think we're taking a good first step tonight, having the appropriate debate and getting the information out. Let's go to line one, Steve. Here it is, line one. Thanks for joining us on Frontline, Texas. What do you think about all this?
I agree with you 100% there, Jack. Just two quick comments. I sent an email for you to GCN today, and I was in and out so much I didn't even find out why I should. And the other one was I had to send one to Good Morning America because I made the mistake of turning on TV this morning, and they were showing that kid from San Marcos, his dog died, and I'm like, hey, why don't you report on the naked guy getting shot in the back, in Round Rock? Good grief, and that CFR member, Diane Sawyer, needs to go. And that's all the comments I've got.
Yeah, all right, thanks, man.
Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, both of the presidential candidates are high-ranking Council on Foreign Relations members, and everybody just says that's a conspiracy. For some reason, Sheila, none of the candidates that get in for the last 30 or 40 years aren't member of one of these societies or Council on Foreign Relations, or we have a trilateral commission president with Barry Obama. But anybody in America can be president. Just keep believing that, and also keep believing that the chip planted in your brain is probably going to be good for you. Line 3. Thank you for joining us. You're on Frontline, Texas.
Hey, Jack, I'd just like to tell you thank you for everything you do. Listen to GCN every day, or at least you try.
Thank you.
Man, this Real ID Act, it's a big issue. I mean, we've got... It's obvious when you look at the Constitution, so absolute violation of the Fourth Amendment rights. And how American people don't understand that is amazing to me. I'm quite young. I'm 22 years old. I was raised in this broken education system, and it's still apparent to me that this is wrong. And if you can't feel it in your gut, then you're not awake. You're sleepwalking.
Yeah.
What about you? I mean, we asked the question, if they pass this and they make this mandatory for you to fly, for you to get food to eat, how far are you willing to go to say no to having a biometric passport, which is one step away from the implantable microchip? How far are you willing to go to say no to this?
Well, I'll go as far as I can, Jack. I mean, I've got to do the best anybody can with what they have. I've got family in the country. I go out there before I took that card.
Why don't you get involved with 511?
Absolutely,
That's simpler.
it's a great idea.
That's a much better, solution. Try to head it off at the pass. I'll tell you, what we've got on our side is we've got a lot
Thanks
of friendly
for the call, man.
legislators who don't want one of these, and also that as soon as this gets daylight, people hate this. It's not the most popular piece of legislation, and I've said this before that whoever authored this did a real crappy job. They invented a piece of legislation that wasn't gonna go unless they snuck it in.
2 or 3 years ago when they first announced they were going to do this, Sheila, it looked like a sure bet, and they really seemed to have their ducks in a row. But since then, the web has kind of unraveled. And to sell this on the basis of immigration, which I kind of think was a big help to them in doing it, that and so-called terrorism, to sell it on immigration means they would have to have the immigration debate again. And you've noticed, if you've been watching the news about the campaigns, they don't want to talk about that. They both want to stay away from that, both McCain and Obama, because their views are very unpopular regarding regional government. And so it is kind of falling apart, but that doesn't mean now, quickly, we have just a few minutes left here. Update us on where we are now. I know you guys had a meeting at Brave New Bookstore yesterday. Love those guys. BraveNewBookstore.com, folks. Brave New Books here in Austin, Texas. And you guys have a legislative approach. But where are we nationally? I know Chertoff was literally threatening states like Montana, threatening to cut them off, threatening that their citizens wouldn't be able to get on airplanes and fly. I mean, the threats are flying from the federal government and Homeland Security. So tell us where they are right now and where we are and how we can kind of bridge the gap.
Okay. First, fair warning with TSA, I want everybody to go get one of these so that they don't have to go rely on the Real ID system. Okay, it may have an RFID, but you can take care of the RFID in a microwave if you don't want to deal with it, okay?
We've got 2 minutes.
Okay, and the second thing I would say is that back the legislation, get involved in the legislative process. We're going to introduce a bill with legislators who are going to support us with, authoring it, getting it out in there, and getting it voted on, and hopefully getting it onto the legislative state forum. There's a national bill, several national bills that we need to get behind, and citizens need to be a part of that.
This isn't just writing your congressman. This is joining with a gang of people around the country. We got the snowball rolling downhill. You're going to join a winning team, basically, is what it looks like.
Well, I mean, you got a lot of people on your side. I mean, this is a great issue to get involved with because it's real personal, fast. 511campaign.com. You can join them here. This is Austin, Texas. This is ready to go national. It's a great prototype. Beatthechip.org for more information. Of course, my websites, and we'll talk about it on my program, which airs 3 to 5, Monday through Friday on 90.1 FM, among other stations here in Texas. Line 1, quick, last call.
Hi.
There you go. Say something quick. Put something on the record, brother.
What I'd like to talk about first is the current programs on Channel 16, 10, 11. If you watch them all, it's kind of hard not to notice something obvious, although people can not notice the most obvious things in the world. What I notice myself is the fact that the only people talking about our impending doom, which is almost certain, and a future of non-history and endless slavery, is white people. If you look at the other
that's not exactly true.
Let me finish what I'm saying.
I'd let you finish. We got 5 seconds left for the end of the show. I said make a quick comment. Thanks for calling in. Folks, thanks for joining us on Frontline Text. I'll be back next week.
Bye.